Hi friends, my name's Trish Roberts and you're watching Faint Signals from Vega. And first of all, I want to thank Real Progressives for giving me the opportunity to talk about veganism on a regular basis. I haven't been able to, I haven't had the time lately to talk about it as much as I'd like to, but I spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, so I thought I would try and catch people in the United States on their lunchtime, if there's anybody on Real Progressives at this time. And so I just wanted to tell a story. I live in rural Tasmania, and we have a lot of pademelons. They're like small, they're like tiny kangaroos, really. They're about a metre high, and they come up. We're on a property of about 5 acres, and they live in the I hope everybody can hear me okay. Let me know if you can't hear me. So they come up from the forest. There's about 3 acres of forest, and they live in the forest, and there's about 24 of them come up every evening. And so this little guy, he's obviously very old, an old pademelon, came up about 10 days ago, and he wasn't looking, that's good, Susan, I'm glad you can hear me. He wasn't looking very well, and we sort of were we put out kangaroo pellets for them, which is a very densely nutritious food that they can just nibble on, and then they go off and do their own thing. Sometimes we throw them also some pieces of carrot. And so there's about 24 come up, and they all eat some of the kangaroo pellets. It's basically just a nibble for all of them, and then they go off and they do their own thing around the place. So, and this little guy, he turned up, and we could see he was either very old, which is most likely, or he is, a young pademelon who's very, very unwell. He's undersized and probably weighs about 3.5 kilos. And he was sort of outside the back door, and we would give him these kangaroo pellets and cut up lots of different bits of fruit, and so he'd eat that. And then about 3 days ago, and it was raining a lot, and so we thought we should probably bring him in. So we picked him up in a blanket, and we put him in a largish cage, and because he was very frail and he was starting to fall over, and so we thought, well, he's probably old, and he's at the end of his life. And so if we just kind of basically look after him and keep him out of the rain and give him lots of nutritious food and sort of do a hospice care thing for him. So and then today we thought we'd take him into the vet, and in the vet in town, which is about an hour and a half away. So we took him into town, and he sort of specializes in wildlife, in quotes. And the vet said that he's probably very old. It's impossible really to tell how old pademelons are, but he's possibly very old. And if he's not, just what we thought, he might be, he's obviously very sick if he's not old. But he doesn't appear to be in any pain. So we took him in there because we thought we might have to euthanize him, because we were not sure. Like, he basically can only lay on his side at the moment. He sits up occasionally, but he lays on his side, and he sort of eats, and I give him a little thing of water, and he drinks the water. And but he doesn't, he's not in any pain, and he's got a good, healthy appetite. And so he's probably at the end of his life, and they only live for about 6 years. So, but anyway, the reason I'm telling you this is because as a vegan, we took him into the vet, and I look around, and lots of people fetishize wildlife, particularly, well, anywhere really, but in Australia, we fetishize different sorts of wildlife, and so and I was sitting there and I'm thinking, well, and also there's cats and dogs come into this veterinary clinic, and how much we all spend on these individuals who are, they're no different really. As a vegan, I recognize they're no different from any other species, the ones that we consider food, that we eat, wear, and use. And I was just sort of thinking how sad it is, because this little guy, he wants to live, and the vet said to us, and this is what we were going to do anyway, but he said, well, just take him home and look after him until he dies. And if you feel like he is in any sort of pain, which is unlikely, but if he is, you can bring him in and we can euthanize him. So we, I was actually very relieved that we didn't have to, that he didn't suggest that we euthanize him. In fact, I cried about it because I just want him to be able to live out his days. And if he's not in any pain, I don't want to prematurely take what little life he has left from him. And just before I came on, he was rustling in the cage a bit, and I gave him some water and some food, and he's actually got a really healthy appetite. And tomorrow I might even take him outside if it's sunny and let him kind of just sit in the sun. But he's no different, even though, he's no different to me than any other animal that we're using for, food, clothing, entertainment, or other reasons. And he loves life no less. I mean, he's hanging in for all he's worth. He wants to live. And even though he's not able to do much, he wants to live. And so, and that's the same with any of the animals that we're using for food, clothing, entertainment, and other reasons. And when I was sitting in the vet, I was thinking, we spend, globally, we spend billions and billions and billions of dollars. I mean, it's a massive industry, is the pet industry. And of course, those animals are considered property as well. They're bred into existence to be sold, and lots of people don't see them as individuals. They see them as sort of like kind of entertainment in a way, or just another sort of something for the kids. And when they get tired of them, if they're not cute anymore, cute in quotes, they take them to shelters, and they're killed by the millions every year. And I live with cats who I adopted from a shelter, rescued from a shelter, and that's a very important thing as a vegan, to rescue animals that are abandoned in shelters. So I just wanted to really share with you, that just briefly, talk about how we do fetishize certain animals, and yet, and if say we saw an animal like this Pademelon, or even if we saw, say, a pig that was in trouble, I mean, you often hear people will be, a truck will fall, a slaughterhouse truck might crash, and then there are pigs in sort of a terrible situation, and people will stop and try and help. We inside, we recognize that these non-human animals are sentient. We recognize that they love life, and the thing is that we will sort of do our best, many of us, to intervene when we see an animal in trouble, whether it's a cow or a pig or a chicken or whatever. We'll do our best to intervene and try and sort of help them, because we recognize something in them. We see that they love life. They want to live, and so we try and do what we can to assist them when we see them in trouble, just in our everyday life. Just like this little Pademelon, we're looking after right now till the end of his life. And because we see, this cognitive dissonance sometimes that we have, we see these animals, when they're not on our plates, when they're on our plates, we just see them as pieces of flesh. We don't really even see them as pieces of flesh. We just see them as food. And, or we see, their secretions as food, like milk, cheese and all of this. And we don't see the violence that is behind these products, these animal products. And I'm going to leave some links. The last time I spoke about veganism a couple of weeks ago, I talked about how dairy is full of violence. It's, oftentimes people don't realize that male calves are killed by the millions because they're of no benefit, they're of no use to the dairy industry, and they're often used as veal. So that veal is a byproduct of the dairy industry. So people think, when people go vegetarian, they think that they're doing something, some people go for vegetarian for ethical reasons, but there's actually plenty of violence they're still eating animal products and wearing animal products often and using animals, but dairy and eggs are products of tremendous violence. And the male chicks in the egg industry are often thrown into grinders alive, or they're thrown into bins and suffocated or just left to die. So these are just a little glimpse into the violence that is in the products that some of us think there's no problem with. But say if there wasn't any problem with it, say if no animals were killed or no animals were in any way tortured, the fact is that those products like eggs and dairy, cheese and all of that, yogurt, they are products that don't belong to us. They're products that are taken from those animals. Actually, the milk belonged to the children of those animals, and those children were either taken away to be killed or taken away to be enslaved. So we have to sort of think that these products like eggs are also products of violence, as I've mentioned, and they are products that belong to those animals. They don't belong to us, and taking them is assuming that they are our resources and that whatever they produce and their bodies are ours to do what we... That's a sort of an indoctrination that we've all been given since birth, because we're born into a species of society. Just like people many years ago, a few centuries ago in the United States, would be born into a situation where it was normal to enslave humans and use them as property and do whatever we wish with them. When you're born into situations like that, where it's a heavy indoctrination, you think that it's normal, it's normalized, it's normal to, at that time before the abolition of slavery. I mean, slavery still exists today in prisons, etc., neo-slavery, but I'm just talking about, when it was legal. People used to be born into towns where, there was people were being used as slaves. Black people were being used as slaves, and that wasn't right then, and it's not right now. And the same goes for veganism, that animals are not our property. The only place where we think that where they exist as property is in our mind. That's the only place where we've just been indoctrinated to believe that because they're another species, that therefore we can use them because might makes right, because we have a human supremacist attitude, and there's no difference, in the ethical position veganism than there is in rejecting, using human beings as property. All these discriminations are all related and cause violence. Speciesism is equal to sexism, is equal to heterosexism, is equal to racism, and so forth. They're all discriminations that otherize a particular group simply based on an irrelevant criterion. And in the case of non-human animals, the irrelevant criterion is species. In racism, the irrelevant criterion, whether people belong to the moral community, it doesn't matter what race they are. they're human beings that are sentient, and they belong to the moral community. And that's the same when we look at non-human animals, that they are sentient, and just because they're another species, that's not relevant to whether they belong to the moral community. And that just means that we don't see them as things. Moral personhood means we don't see non-human animals as things. So although most of us, because we're not vegan, because we still see non-human animals as things, as property, that doesn't mean that they are. Just because we think that doesn't make it so. So that's something we need to consider and try and open our mind up to. If you're not vegan, and many of us aren't, but it's growing. Veganism is becoming more widespread. It's growing exponentially. But if you're not vegan, you're still part of that indoctrination that we've all been we've all been sort of exposed to since we were born. And even though we would be read lovely little stories about about animals in nursery rhymes and books, children's books, and they're given names, etc. And there's these happy little farms, which really don't exist, but happy little farms where all the animals are happy. And, these are the stories we're read. And meanwhile, our parents were sitting us down to these bodies of these so-called happy little animals that were in these books that we were being read stories about. And see, that's the complete moral confusion that we're exposed to right from when we're young. Some animals are to be treasured, and other animals are here for us to eat, wear, and use. The thing is that all animals, we are taught that they are here to please us, that they're here for us, and they're here for their own existence. They're not here for their own purposes, even though they're very sentient, and we can see that. But when it's inconvenient, we don't recognize it. And most of us won't recognize that they're sentient because it's inconvenient, and we want to please our palate pleasure, or through tradition or habit or convenience. We don't want to see that. The thing is that becoming vegan is actually a really amazing thing for one's psyche. When you recognize, when you start to see, and it takes a while even after one becomes vegan, when you start to see these non-human animals as sentient beings, it starts to open a whole world up for us, which and gets us more connected to the world. And that's something that we all need to be. We're living in a fairly dysfunctional world, really, where it's not conducive in many ways to mental health, with all the violence that we're committing toward others, like the tragic thing that happened in Charlottesville, and the racism. And this is an example of, people, a discrimination that causes violence, just like all discriminations cause violence towards certain groups. We've got wars that are being waged for resources and hegemony, and that's also involves racism. And they're often toward millions and millions of brown people, killing brown people overseas. That's otherizing a group based on an irrelevant criterion of race. And all these, as I say, all these discriminations are all related, and they all cause violence. And where you have one discrimination, like speciesism, you will have all forms of discrimination. Just like that saying goes, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So that's something that we, if we're going to have a sort of a healthy world to live in, and that means a psychologically healthy place to live in, we're going to have to abolish, the violence that is happening, and that starts with us, each one of us. It's not our governments Our governments, of course, they have individuals that are very problematic and possibly psychopathic, yes. But I mean, we put these people in government, and they're also a reflection of our moral confusion and also our racism and all of that. It all starts with us, each individual, and if we can't address our own violence, our own participation in violence, and that starts with veganism. That starts with how we view the most vulnerable amongst us, which are non-human animals. If we view them and we think we can do whatever we wish to them because they're vulnerable and because they can't stop us from doing that, then that attitude spreads to every other situation in our life, whether we realize it or not. It also it becomes a reflection of what we're doing to others in other countries. If we feel that we can do what we want to do to others, whether they're non-humans or humans, simply because might makes right, simply because we have the greatest military force in the world, and therefore we can get anybody to submit to us and to do what we want. And if they don't, then we vilify them, and then we do what we can to destroy them. That attitude has stemmed from something in us that we are either not calling out for the end of that, and we're also participating in a sort of a violence which is objectifying and using sentient animals as resources. If we think that that's okay, and we can't recognize that they are sentient and we're doing it because we can, then that can't help. But that's like a microcosm of what we're doing in the greater world. And non-human animals are 99.99% of the planet's population. So we're basically viewing 99.99% of the planet's population as things, as resources, as entertainment. So, if we're viewing most of the planet's population this way, that's a huge problem. It can't help, if we're torturing and murdering 1 trillion land and aquatic animals every year, and that's literally about 180 million land and aquatic animals, and that's a conservative estimate. Land and aquatic animals every day. That tremendous violence can't help but infuse our lives, whether we're conscious of it or not. It can't help but affect everything that we do, and also the right makes might. The might makes right. This sort of this idea that either because we're white people we deserve to be able to do what we like, or if we're oligarchs we deserve to be able to do what we like, or if we're not vegan we can do whatever we like to that group of individuals. We can kill an animal and nobody's going to take us to jail over it. That's because that animal is viewed as property. But they're sentient beings and they love life, just like that little Pademelon that I was talking about earlier, whom we've called Alex. And I already am very attached to him, and I know that I'm going to be very brokenhearted when, Alex dies. He loves life, and those other animals that, I've been vegan now for 12 years, and this is when I talk about veganism, there's no judgment involved, because I've spent, most of my life as a non-vegan. I've been vegetarian on and off, but that was still just participating in violence. I was still sort of consuming animal products. I was still eating dairy and all of the violence that means, and eggs, and I was, wearing wool and things like that. So, but I spent 45 years of my life being not vegan. And so, and I sort of did an estimate, and that's probably about at least 4,000 lives I have participated in the taking of. 4,000 lives, you know, or probably more, because, you know, a lot, when one eats aquatic animals, usually one eats a lot of them, you know, if they're small or whatever. So, you know, that's a terrible thing. I think about that, and I think, and part of, you know, doing vegan education, I do it because, and I don't do it for any personal gain. I'm not making any money from it. It doesn't make me popular either in many circles, but that's okay. You know, I do it because I recognized when finally I realized what I was doing, and that was when I read about dairy online, and I thought, oh my goodness, if this is what they're doing to dairy cows, a situation that I thought didn't have violence in it, I have to reject that and reject everything. And I have to reject using them this way, you know, that they're sentient. So that's something that I woke up to. But I spent all those years, 45 years of my life, participating in the torture and murder of all those 4,000, you know, sentient animals. And that was I have to live with that now. I have to live with that fact that I have participated in that. And at the ending of lives, just like that little guy who we're looking after, who loved life and didn't want to die, and they were enslaved, and they had their children taken from them, and they had eventually were, you know, taken to those horror houses of slaughterhouses, and whether they were on a happy mom and pop farm or on a big, large industrial scale farm. You know, and so I participated in that, and that's something that I have to live with. But there's no point in me dwelling in that guilt and wringing my hands about it. The important thing is that I try and do my small part in just talking about this issue, and hopefully communicating some of the ideas of why, what we're doing with non-human animals is so problematic, and how that affects everything that's happening in the world today. And as you've noticed, the violence is just increasing more and more and more, and there's many reasons for that. But I don't know if we really recognize that this participation in violence we do every single day when we eat, wear, and use animals has to affect everything that's going on. And we have to think about that every single day, 180 or more million non-human animals are being killed every single day, tortured and murdered every single day for trivial reasons of mostly palate pleasure or habit or convenience or tradition. And something I haven't mentioned is how simple now it is to become vegan. Once you've internalized the ethical position, which is a very, very important thing, because that's what veganism is. It's an ethical position, just like any other ethical position. That's why when one becomes vegan, one rejects. When one becomes an ethical vegan, that's what veganism is, one rejects all forms of animal exploitation. There's no such thing as the happy animal slavery, the humane animal products, you know, thinking that that's okay to do that. There's no such thing as taking products from animals on the mom and pop farms, because they also, there's violence involved in that, and also that's considering them resources. So that's something that we, as a vegan, I recognize now. But veganism is much easier than people think. And in fact, apparently, not that I like Google, but apparently that's one of the most popular searches on Google is veganism now. I mean, it's actually really taking off. People recognize. Many people call themselves vegan, of course, and that doesn't necessarily mean they've internalized the ethical position. They might be eating a plant-based diet. But the fact is that there's veganism is taking hold in a very big way, and people are recognizing not only that that animals are sentient, but they're also recognizing that the tremendous health benefits of becoming vegan. Oh, John, I'm from Tasmania in Australia. Yeah, and the other a very, very important thing which affects us all is the 51% of greenhouse gases from animal agriculture, and one can quibble about the percentage, but it's it's being recognized as a major contributor to climate change, and so we if you watch the documentary Cowspiracy, it's a it's about animal agriculture's devastation to rainforests. It's the number one destructive force in the Amazon rainforest. 1 acre every second of Amazon rainforest is cleared for animal agriculture and for feed to be used in animal agriculture. So, that's just one of the devastating facts about animal agriculture. So, I invite you to check out my vegan podcast. It's called howtogovegan.org. And if you check that out, it covers all the different ethical issues. It also covers nutrition. I don't make any money from it. It also covers the environmental devastation. So I invite you to check that out, howtogovegan.org, to find out more about how to go vegan. And if you have any questions whatsoever, I'm more than happy to answer them. In fact, if people want to leave questions in the comments section, I'll check them out, and maybe the next vegan video I do, I will I'll do my best to answer those questions. And so please feel free to do that. And if you want to contact me directly and ask a question, if you're a bit shy, that's absolutely fine. Some people, I've noticed, I was like this too. When I started becoming interested in when I became vegan, and I was finding out more about it, I used to lurk on social media sites and find out about it. And I think a lot of people do that. That's the great thing about, sort of online. You can sort of lurk and find out about stuff if you don't want to be talking to people. But anyway, if you want to speak to me directly, just write to info@howtogovegan.org. That's info@howtogovegan.org. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have, and I'll do my best to do that. And I've had some people write to me recently that saw the last live stream and something resonated with them, and that makes me very happy indeed, because veganism, as Victor Hugo's quote goes, this is an idea whose time has come. Veganism is an idea whose time has come, and it'll be a much more non-violent planet and a most wonderful planet when most people are vegan. It really will, because if we're not torturing and murdering 180 million animals every day for trivial reasons, I mean, imagine how different that will make everything. It really will. So, and thanks very much. That might be Mike Sonato posting that info at howtogovegan.org. Thanks so much for doing that, whoever is doing that. So that's really all I wanted to say. Excuse me. It's quite late here, actually. It's about 2:30 a.m. I just wanted to pop on, sort of in the middle of the day in New York time, and just kind of have a little talk about veganism. And I just, I really think that I'll just say one more thing, that that's right. Info at howtogovegan.org. And the important thing is that if we want to live in a mentally healthy society, then we're going to have to remove all the violence that is here today. And there's so much of it, what we're doing to other people in other countries for resources and hegemony, militarily. And we're doing that to millions and millions of people. And what we're doing to non-human animals every day, we're doing to literally hundreds of millions of non-human animals. So I just want to say to you that it is really, really a lot easier than people think to be vegan. And the food, vegan plant-based diets, I won't call it a vegan diet because it's a plant-based diet, is delicious. There's so many cuisines. You can look online and there's literally thousands and thousands of recipes and thousands of cookbooks, but you can also find, if you're into that, pre-made products too. They're not very healthy, but if you want to do transition stuff and you want to, some people want to eat, faux animal products, plant-based type animal products. I don't really get into that, but if people want to do that as a transition, there's certainly a great variety of those. They're not very healthy, but sometimes that's a transition thing for some people. So but a plant-based diet is delicious, and also the removal of animal products from one's life is really not a hardship. It really isn't. I mean, I've been vegan for 12 years, and it's absolutely not a hardship, and it's not. In fact, as I've said before, and I'm not exaggerating, it would have been a tragedy for me had I died and not become vegan. That's how important it is for me. That's how significant I feel it is. And I just want to relay that to people, that you won't realize how significant and how incredible that is, how incredible it is for you as a person, inside here, and your health, and just the tremendous decrease in the contribution to climate change, all of that. It's something that is just tremendously important in an ethical sense, but it's also tremendously important for the planet and the refugees that are becoming more and more from climate. From climate change, and we're directly contributing to that when we're not vegan. We're directly contributing to Bangladesh going underwater. Florida eventually will go underwater, but that's the least of our worries. It isn't, of course, for people living in Bangladesh who are literally going underwater now, and that could be that will be a disaster. I mean, we're literally contributing to the destruction of the Amazon rainforest. 1 second an acre every second is being cleared, and that means all those animals that we fetishize in that rainforest, they are all losing their habitat and being driven out of existence. 200 species every day are being driven out of existence, and we are contributing to that if we're not vegan. People like to pretend that's not important. Green groups and environmental groups in general try to pretend that this isn't an important issue, but it really is. It's that important. So, so we have to be honest with ourselves and think, well, if I really care about the planet, if I care about climate refugees, if I care about the rainforests, if I care that we're going to take everybody with us. It might happen anyway, but we're participating in the end of our species and many other species when we're not vegan. So, we can do what we can right now. We don't need to wait for any corporations or businesses or anybody to give us permission. We just need to change here and think about what we're doing and see that as bad as being participating in racism or heterosexism or classism, etc. It's just as bad as all those different forms of discrimination. So once we become vegan, that starts to really sink in, and we start to see things in a much more holistic way, and our life becomes instantly more nonviolent. So what could be better than that? So, we're all, on Real Progressives. I assume everybody on Real Progressives wants a more nonviolent planet, and we want we're anti-imperialist, I hope, and we're anti-racist, and all those other discriminations. And the last area that is as important as all that is speciesism. We need to end. We need to unlearn speciesism. We need to remove that from our life, and the way to do that is to become vegan and stop using animals for food: dairy, eggs, meat, etc., clothing, wool, fur, silk, leather, etc., and other reasons, entertainment and all of that. And of course, very importantly, adopting and fostering non-human refugees in shelters like dogs, cats, and rabbits, etc., rescuing those individuals and looking after them for the rest of their lives and giving them love, etc. That's a very, very important part of being vegan. So once we stop thinking of animals and seeing them as something that is here for us to use, that will change our lives completely. Feel free to contact me and ask me anything that you wish. info@howtogovegan.org, or just leave some comments in the comments section. Leave some questions if you like, and next, probably in a couple of weeks or maybe in a week, I'll come on and I will answer some questions, and maybe do also answer some frequently asked questions that vegans are asked on a regular basis. Okay, so that's really all I wanted to say. So thank you so much for taking the time to, if you were around, to leave some comments, and I hope that you'll join me next time. And also I have another program that I do on Fridays at 9:15 Eastern Daylight Savings Time on Real Progressives, and on my Facebook page, The Naked Empire. And every week, if I'm lucky, I get to talk to independent journalists about anti-imperialism and anti-war. Last week I spoke to Ben Norton, and it was a really great interview. He was so knowledgeable, so I invite you to check that out. And that was about 2.5 hours. He was just so knowledgeable. It was wonderful. And hopefully, if David Swanson is able to, he will join me this coming Friday at 9:15 Eastern Daylight Savings Time on Real Progressive. So I'll probably leave a notifications thing that you can get live notifications for that. So thanks so much for watching, and till next time, my name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Till next time, bye for now.